Dear friends, it is my joy to bring to you this moment, the International Policy Panel. We are delighted that we have global guests that have come, really, from like the South Pacific area, South Sudan, and Philippines. It's just really wonderful that God has blessed us to have them here with us. They've come a long way, so we want to be attentive and be ready with our questions because this is a wonderful opportunity for engagement. The theme for our International Policy Panel is corruption, conflict, climate change, and the world's uprooted. We are very pleased to introduce to you our moderator for this panel. Asma Latif is the director of the Institute at Bread for the World, and it was under her leadership that the Hunger Report of this 2017 underscored some of the issues that we're discussing today, the issues around fragility. She comes to us not only with that kind of visionary leadership of that kind of major report that is circulated to public policy leaders here and globally, but she also has 20 plus years of experience in this work as a public policy expert. We are pleased to bring her to the stage now to introduce her panel, who will come to you now. Please welcome with me, Asma.
Thank you very much, Angelique, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And happy Earth Day. Yes. As Angelique said, I have worked on these issues of hunger and poverty for more than 20 years now, and I have to say, I am an optimist. During those years, hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. In fact, we have witnessed one of the most remarkable reductions in extreme poverty in human history, from 37% of the world's population in 1990 to just under 10% in 2015. In 1990, hunger affected 1 in 4 people in the world. Now, 1 in 9 people suffer from hunger. Still too many, but progress nonetheless. I'm encouraged by the fact that the Millennium Development Goals, which were adopted in 2000, helped focus attention and resources, and that because of the dramatic progress over the last 25 years, in 2015, the international community adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, which aim even higher to end extreme poverty and hunger by 2030, and to do so in ways that protect the planet and leave no one behind. The SDGs recognize that this will not be easy. It'll require peace and security and effective institutions. Progress is feasible, but it is not inevitable, and nor is it guaranteed. We have to continue to work on it and push for the right policies. And indeed, there are dark clouds on the horizon. In recent years, we have seen an uptick in the number of people who are hungry. There are more and more humanitarian crises, and the nature of those crises is changing. While 15 years ago, they were caused by natural disasters, these are now increasingly driven by conflict. Between 2004 and 2014, the number of major civil wars nearly tripled, from 4 to 11, compared to the previous decade where the number had been declining. At the beginning of 2016, there were 33 active conflicts around the world, and the number of people forcibly displaced by conflict reached 65 million, the highest since World War II. Climate change is a contributing factor to food insecurity and conflict. Corruption and poor governance is also hindering an effective response to crises and creating divisions. In order to cope, people are on the move, leaving their homes and communities to escape violence or a protracted drought, and to find decent work. Since 2000, the number of migrants has increased by 40%. There are now 250 million migrants across the world. Today, we will explore these issues with an amazing panel and discuss how conflict, climate change, and corruption are affecting communities and countries they work in. I will introduce the panel, and they will each then give a brief overview of what their organizations do on these issues. And then we'll have a brief discussion. I have about 3 or 4 questions for the panelists, and then we will turn it over to you. So hopefully we'll have a good amount of time for a discussion with all of you. Our first panelist to my right is Reverend James Makwe Chul. He serves as the Executive Director of the Presbyterian Relief and Development Agency, the humanitarian arm of the Presbyterian Church of South Sudan. He is a highly experienced advocate for peace and reconciliation in South Sudan, with a strong commitment to human rights and humanitarian issues. Reverend Chul works in partnership with local communities to further PRDA's mission of hope through community-based relief efforts, rehabilitation, and development activities that meet and address the social and physical needs of South Sudan's people. Next to Reverend Chul is John Din. He serves as Philippines Regional Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Coordinator of the Catholic Society of St. Columban. He was also a coordinator of the Philippines Lay Missionary Program of the Columbans. He serves as Philippines National Coordinator of the Global Catholic Climate Movement, having previously done missionary work in Brazil and Peru. And next to John is Reverend Tafwe Molu Lusama. He is the General Secretary of the Congregational Christian Church of Tuvalu. Reverend Lusama graduated and received his master's degree from Tainan Seminary in Taiwan. In recent years, he has become a pioneer of advocating climate changes in the Pacific, calling attention in particular to the impact of global warming on small island nations and on increased climate migration. As a member of the Central Committee of the World Council of Churches, he has been part of the climate change team and made presentations at major conferences like the 2011 International Ecumenical Peace Convocation in Kingston, Jamaica. He's participated in Tuvaluan delegations to several conferences of parties, meetings on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. He's also been active with Greenpeace and advocacy on climate change issues in Australia and New Zealand. With that, I'll turn to Reverend Chul to give an overview of his work.
Thank you very much. On behalf of PRDA, the Presbyterian Church of South Sudan, and the downtrodden South Sudanese people in general, I would like to express my deep thanks and gratitude to Presbyterian Disaster Assistance and PCUSA for the invitation extended to me to come and share with you the U.S. churches, citizens, and if possible, the U.S. administration, our story. The story of the deadly war in South Sudan that has caused thousands of deaths, massive displacement of millions of South Sudanese people, both internally and externally, unprecedented human rights abuses and destruction of social and physical infrastructure, and disruption of the livelihood of the majority of the population. I feel strongly honored and privileged to come and participate in this important forum organized by PC USA PDA, where I can share our story. Other U.S. churches and NGOs for their contribution in various ways in support of the South Sudanese people at this difficult time. The U.S. government, through the pressure of the U.S. churches, citizens, and other organizations, the U.S. government immensely contributed in the emancipation of the South Sudan in 2011. Today, we are principally a free and independent people because of you, the American people, churches, and government. And we believe U.S. will not abandon us during the current predicament till the people of South Sudan are once again a free, peaceful, and happy people. The issues that are causing suffering in the Republic of South Sudan are ethnic violence, conflict that came about as a power struggle between the leaders, the president and the vice president. That was in 2013. Currently, we have 3 types of displacement. There are those who have run to neighboring countries of Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and DRC Congo. And there are those who have run to the jungles of South Sudan who are continuously suffering without being registered. And there are also those who are displaced within the cities of South Sudan who are now under the protection of the UN mission in South Sudan. These people, you might be aware that the UN could not reach the threshold for their fundraising to support the lives of the refugees and the IDPs. It is against this background that we appeal to you, brethren in Christ, so that you come on support of the suffering people of South Sudan. The category of the refugees in those countries, the statistics goes as follows. In Uganda, according to UNHCR, there are 1,053,598 South Sudanese refugees in Uganda. In Sudan, 767,992 South Sudanese refugees in Sudan. In Ethiopia, there are 428,928 South Sudanese refugees in Ethiopia. Kenya, we have 113,039 South Sudanese refugees. In DR Congo, we have 90,003 South Sudanese refugees. In total, we have 2,453,560 refugees. These refugees, they are indeed suffering through trauma, confinement in makeshift camps, the iron sheet that is too hot on them, and during the night is too cold also for them. So this situation, many of them are dying. Children are dying. Women and young girls have succumbed to predators you may understand, I may not further explain how they are suffering. Their dignity is compromised. Even for them to get these kind of women things, you call it always, or it has a different name here. So this for them to prostitution so that they can resolve this challenge with threatening their dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the few remarks that I would like to put forward. Indeed, we appeal to you as government to put pressure on the warring parties so that the conflict is resolved peacefully. We also appeal to the churches to keep on the banner of fire so that the suffering of the people is brought to an end. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Chul. You really bring in a reality that a lot of refugees end up staying in their host countries for decades. It becomes a permanent challenge unless parties intervene and peace is restored. We'll now move to hear more about climate change and corruption and how that affects migration.
Good morning to everybody. In behalf of the Colombians from the Philippines, we would like to thank you for inviting us. The Colombian missionaries arrived in the Philippines in 1929 and started working in Mindanao, Visayas, and the Luzon Island. The Colombians are involved with the Muslim and Christian dialogue in Mindanao. So I am particularly very saddened with what happened to Jerome Abba. I don't think that is proper for a country of immigrants. So in behalf of the Colombians, we would like to express our sadness for what happened to one of our fellow countrymen from the Philippines. The Colombians also work with the indigenous people in Mindanao and in Luzon, and also on the area of human rights. During the time of Marcos, we have a couple of priests who were expelled from the Philippines and were accused of political murders, and later on sent home. The other thing that the Colombians are involved currently is in the program, the relief program for the different typhoons that have hit the Philippines. In 2011, Typhoon Sendong hit very hardly in Cagayan de Oro. That's in the south of the Philippines. The people thought at that time that that was the strongest typhoon that we will ever have. In 2012, there was another typhoon in Mindanao. That's Typhoon Pablo, and it's even worse than Typhoon Sendong. And then people think, oh, maybe this is it. And then in 2013, we have the Typhoon Yolanda, and that was Category 5. So the Colombians are involved in relief programs, rehabilitation of houses for the victims. But considering also the culture of corruption now that is built in the Philippines, also in the political structures, there was a current study done by the Ateneo de Manila University on the political dynasty in the Philippines. You see in the Philippines, you see a scenario where a governor, the father is a governor, the wife is vice governor, the son is mayor, the other daughter is vice mayor. That is a common scenario in the Philippines. Between 70 to 80% of our politicians, both in the lower house and in the Senate, are coming from political dynasties. And in these studies, it was found out that in provinces where political dynasties existed, there is also a very high index of poverty. And the other issues that I would also like to bring here is on the issue of human rights. Just a couple months ago, the Duterte government presented their accomplishment report in the Supreme Court. And the total number there roughly of the people killed due to legitimate police operations are around 4,000. Other people argue like that most of the cases they said these are people who resist arrest. But there are voices raising that these people are not necessarily resisting arrest, but there was an intention to kill. The other number that the government considered the death under investigation, that's around 16,000. These people are killed, they are wrapped in a package tape, and besides, there is a cardboard that's written, "I am a drug addict, do not be like me." There's a gun beside, and then a couple of packs of shabu. Together with the different religious associations in the Philippines, we have made a lot of protest against these extrajudicial killings. We have also sent, we made signature campaigns to express our disgust for what's happening in the Philippines. But the current President Duterte says that there is no hope for drug addicts and they're not humans. So there is no possibility of change. I think that's totally against our Christian faith. So in general, that would be the three things that I would like to share here. Like, the three issues: the whole issue of Muslim-Christian dialogue, the challenge of climate change that's affecting the Filipinos, and the culture of corruptions and human rights violation. Thank you.
Reverend Zisama, please go ahead.
Good morning. I would like to align myself with my colleagues by extending our gratitude and thank you for the invitation sent to us to be part of this panel. And I bring greetings from my church and my people and assure you that your solidarity with us is always felt as a relief to us in our struggle. I'm going to talk about climate change and its impacts on our people. And I'm going to apologize on the outset that the story I am going to talk about this morning is not a very joyful one. And I would like to invite you all, please, because it's complicated. It's not easy to explain. So I would like to invite you to Google up the name Tuvalu so that you know the geography of the... Tuvalu is one of the fourth smallest independent country in the world, but it is the smallest in size in the world. We live on 8 inhabited islands, atoll islands, with the elevation of 3 meters above sea level. Every aspect of life are being challenged by the impacts of climate change. And that includes food security, land erosion, coral bleaching, droughts, and the frequent visits of the cyclones and the intensity of the cyclones have accelerated in the past decade. The widest part of the island will be around 1,000 meters across from the ocean to the lagoon, and the narrowest part will be between 5 and 10 meters. So you can stand in the middle at the narrowest part of the islands, throw a stone across, it lands on the Pacific Ocean, and then throw another stone and it lands in the lagoon. And you can imagine how small the place is and how vulnerable it is to the impacts of climate change. We are losing our lands. our traditional way of farming are being challenged because the land is not fertile, it is sandy. So when it rains, the rain seeps through the sands and rests in the underground waterlands. And that's where we plant. We dig down to the underground waterlands and plant. But because of the intrusion of salt water into our underground lands, it has been salinated, so we cannot plant our traditional crops. So the life has become very difficult. People have started relocating or moving, not only internally, because there's not much space to move internally. They have moved out of the country as well. So these are the challenges that we face. Our church, the Congregational Christian Church of Tuvalu, which we call the Ecclesia Galiciana Tuvalu, have worked with the government on this issue. And we have around 87% of the population as members of our church. We have been very active locally, regionally, and internationally on trying to raise our voice, the voice of our people, and the suffering that we face. We simply believe that if Tuvalu is the beginning of the visible disappearance of islands and the suffering that we are facing, then it should be the beginning of the solution. I'll stop there for now. I'll talk more when the questions come. Thank you.
Thank you all. So the first question really is around exploring a little bit about how individuals, communities are really coping with the challenges in each country context. In the context of South Sudan, how do you see climate change, conflict, and poor governance sort of really affecting the day-to-day lives of people? And is forced migration really the only route for people? Could you say a little bit more about how all of these things are coming together and what it means for individual people?
Thank you very much. Indeed, the impact of the current conflict in South Sudan, of course, when people are disloyed from the comfort of their homes, the rest of the life is really put into jeopardy. Of course, they are suffering because of lack of medical services, lack of sustenance in terms of food, because whatever they receive from the United Nations is not actually sustaining their lives. A lot of death is happening simply because children are malnourished, lactating mothers have no strength, pregnant mothers, they are dying during the labor. Indeed, these people are really suffering because the insecurity that forces them to move away from their respective areas is a challenge. Also, the peace process that may bring hope to our people is dragging. It was signed since 2015. Again, it was derailed in 2016. And to date, the fighting is still continuing. So the only hope that may help our people to come out from this is a peaceful settlement of the current conflict. And also the continuous support on humanitarian needs, both to the internal displaced persons inside South Sudan and also the refugees in the neighboring countries. The suffering is very severe. I have no words to explain because our people are really suffering. Thank you.
Thank you. John, can you speak a little bit about how climate change is affecting the day-to-day lives of the people in your communities?
I will speak with the experience of since 2011 to 2013, we have had 3 very strong typhoons there. The last one being Yolanda, considered as Category 5. Start with the Typhoon Sendong in Cagayan de Oro. There's always the trouble of finding place to locate the people for a new, like when Typhoon Sendong happens, there were thousands of people had to be displaced in another location. And there's trouble with finding land that is available for the families. The government, what they built was the bunk houses. And the religious congregations in Cagayan de Oro at that time, they thought, I think we have to provide decent, simple houses for people, not just squares, like a very small size for big families. So together with different congregations, they were able to build houses, but at least separate houses that has still land for people to be able to move. Unfortunately, it also happens that there were housing projects by the government. Now, Typhoon Sendong happened in 2011. Last year, there was a report like that there was around 100 houses, 1,000 houses considered to be for the victims of Typhoon Sendong, but these houses, only 300 were occupied after how many years? And because they were built with poor materials. So there's a whole things of corruptions there. And the other issue in the case of Typhoon Yolanda, in our experience, we were there for the rehabilitation program. There was always, again, difficulty of finding where to place these people who were living right beside in the coast, because they were told you're not allowed to go back there. And some people still decided to go back because there's no other options. The government offered a land, but it's 20 kilometers from the main city. And the people felt like if we go there, like how can we move back to the city for our work? And is there light and is there water? Some congregations there, when they receive donations, they actually have to buy the land near the city to ensure that people can stay near and have access to transportation, water, and electricity. And the third experience, this is about the indigenous people in the Sierra Madre mountain range in the north part of the Philippines. In 2013, President Benigno Aquino declared that there will be water shortage in Manila. So to ensure that there'll be supply of water, instead of doing reforestation of the Sierra Madre mountains, the government decided that they will build lands. They will build 3 dams there. And that means displacing people, particularly the Dumaga tribe. And they said, oh, it's a huge size of land. They never understood that the indigenous people lives in that land, and they walk in that land all through the years. They try to build houses, concrete houses for the indigenous people, and they were surprised why they're not staying there. Because again, the concept of house is not just a building. Their lives is very much anchored in the land. I think that's one, that's the displacement of the people in the lowlands, but also of the indigenous people because of government projects that's taking place.
Thank you. my country does not have any natural resources. We depend on the land and the sea for our daily sustenance. We plant and we harvest what we plant. We go out fishing to catch enough for the day. And that is how our people have sustained their livelihood throughout history. Now, when you live in such a lifestyle, you, as a Christian, believe that when you go out fishing, God will provide. When you plant, God will provide. What happens when you go out fishing and you don't catch enough? Because the corals has been bleached and the fish stocks have simply died out or move out further into the ocean. What happens when you plant and your garden does not bear fruits? Now, that raises a question of concerning God's providence. Where is God? Why is this happening to us? Are we being deserted by God? And that is exactly what is happening with our people. The spirituality of the people is being affected. As I said, because we can no longer plant our traditional crops, we can no longer fish to catch enough, and around 80% of the population do not earn regular salaries to cater for